Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is April the 1st, 2024. It has been 3,717 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 41 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 38 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened over the weekend. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. There are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. Since March the 22nd, Russia has violated Article 56 of the Geneva Conventions, intentional targeting of works and installations containing dangerous forces, 6 times, with only one incident acknowledged by the international community. In our assessment, the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs is only promoting further aggression. 2. Russia's campaign to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure has had a significant economic and social impact and risks increasing world grain prices and contributing to acute food shortages in Africa due to power outages at Odesa region ports. 3. The disjointed response of Russian aggression by Ukraine's allies continues to embolden Moscow, leading to the most serious airspace violation of a NATO country since Russia expanded its war of aggression on February 24, 2022. We maintain that the inaction by the United States and the excessively risk-averse rules of engagement forced on the NATO alliance are creating an environment ripe for a serious international incident. 4. The filing of a motion to vacate against Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and the April 19th resignation of Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher has created a window of opportunity that could move U.S. military aid for Ukraine forward. 5. In our assessment, Ukraine has suspended its systematic targeting of Russia's oil refining capability. 6. Recent tit-for-tat nuclear threats from retired French General Jean-Paul Perouche further confirm that Russian aggression has sparked a new Cold War, and the world remains in the early stages of the mutually assured destruction and stability paradox. 7. Despite recent Russian gains, we maintain that the second phase of the Russian 2024 winter offensive has reached its culmination point, and Russia is preparing for a summer offensive. 8. In our assessment, the continued attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and the situation at the facility is more serious than what the International Atomic Energy Agency is reporting. We start today's report in Kharkiv and Luhansk oblasts, where the situation remains relatively calm in the Kupiansk area of operation, OREO. The Russian Ministry of Defense Armored claimed there was continued positional fighting in the Sinkivka area. In the northeastern tip of the Kharkiv Oblast, Ukrainian border guards raised flags in the villages of Shabelne, Peshchane and Dekhtyarne. The area was liberated in October 2022, but is within the 5-kilometer exclusion zone along the Russian border. The city of Kharkiv was attacked on Sunday, with Russian forces targeting civilian infrastructure in the Shevchenkivsky district. At the time of publication, the only information was there were no casualties. Russian forces attacked Borova with rockets fired by multiple launch rocket systems, MLRS. A 19-year-old was killed and another man was wounded. The attack damaged apartment buildings and retail stores. In the Crimea of Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces continued their attacks east of Terny without success. Across the Siversky Donets River in the Siverskaya, Ukrainian forces continued to repulse Russian attacks on the eastern edge of Bilogorivka. Moving to the Donbas, starting in northeast Donetsk Oblast. In the Bakhmut area, Russian sources claimed that fighting continued near Bogdanivka, with no change in the situation. South of the village, Russian troops continued their push toward the ridge on the eastern edge of Chasiv Yar. Fighting also continued in Ivanivske, with Ukrainian forces holding their defense lines in the center of the settlement. In the Klishchiivka area, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, GSAFU, reported fighting continued in the areas of Klishchiivka and Andriivka, with no change in the situation. In the Toretsk, New York area, Armored continued to use vague language in their morning report that suggested fighting continued in the Shumy and Pivdenne areas on the edge of Gorlivka and near Mayorsk. In southwest Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces launched point attacks in the Avdiivka area, using up to a battalion of armor led by main battle tanks, leading to tactical gains but at a very heavy price. Fighting continued in Berdyche to Semenivka to east of Umanske, where there has been little change. Near Tonenke, a March 30th attack by Russian forces included 36 main battle and medium-duty tanks and 12 infantry fighting vehicles, IFVs, supported by light infantry. Russian forces were able to make marginal gains, but lost 42% of their armored column, 12 tanks and 8 IFVs. We'll link to the video in our daily situation report. There's more information in the podcast description. For the south, geolocated videos showed that Russian troops had advanced through western Vodyane, linking up with Russian troops in Pervomaiske, who continued to push west toward Netailova. In our assessment, Russian forces have also captured Vodyane and Pervomaiske. Heavy fighting continued in the Vuhledar area. Russian mercenary blogger Wogonzo claimed fighting continued near Krasnogorivka. Russian and Ukrainian sources reported that Russian assaults continued east of Georgievka. South of Novomykhailivka, Russian forces supported by armor advanced along a tree line, reaching the southwestern tip of the settlement. The situation has become very critical, with Russian forces now controlling 60 to 70% of the town. GSAFU reported that a Russian attack in the direction of Vodyane, not to be confused with the captured settlement in the Avdiivka area, had been repulsed, but didn't clarify if this was the Russian thrust south of Novomykhailivka or a new attack out of Solodka. In Volodymyrivka, Ukrainian forces raised the flag in the northeastern part of the settlement at an industrial plant. It is unclear if this was a new advance, a consolidation of earlier gains, or meant to harass Russian troops. Based on the new information, we moved the line of conflict to the south and reduced the grey area. Russian forces have become more active in the Staromlinivka area, but these are likely subordinate attacks meant to lock Ukrainian resources in place. Russian troops made a small advance south of Rozhaine, and based on the new intelligence, the line of conflict was adjusted. Fighting continued west of Staromayorsk, where Ukrainian forces steadfastly hold their defense positions. Armored claimed there was continued fighting in the area of Priyutne on the Donetsk-Zaporizhia Oblast's administrative border. Here's what's happened over the weekend in the Black Sea, occupied Crimea, Mykolaiv and Odesa oblasts. Operational Command South reported that the Russian Black Sea Fleet has withdrawn from occupied Sevastopol to the Russian port of Novorossiysk. The only operational vessel that remains is the Cyclone, a Karakurt-class missile corvette capable of launching 4-caliber cruise missiles. The main Defense Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom shared satellite images that showed Russia has strengthened defenses at the entrance of Novorossiysk. In their assessment, quote, "The port serves a crucial role in sheltering the Black Sea Fleet's most valuable assets." On March 31st, air defense in the Odesa region intercepted 8 Shahed-136 one-way drones, with debris from one striking critical civilian infrastructure. Power was temporarily knocked out to 10,000 households and businesses outside of the city. The sustained Russian attacks, which have lasted a week, have suspended the loading of grain and other exports. The delays came at a time when Russia has blocked exports from its second-largest grain trader for more than a week. In our assessment, continued attacks on Ukraine's energy grid and port infrastructure will worsen food shortages in Africa and the Greater Middle East. On Catholic Easter morning, the Polish Air Force, supported by the United States, scrambled F-16s in response to a Russian missile attack on Ukraine. There were no airspace violations. The Prime Minister of Romania, Marcel Ciolacu, would not say whether the drone that crashed 23 kilometers from the Ukrainian border was of Russian origin. Quote, "Let's wait for the investigation. If we look at the crater, there was no explosion, so it couldn't have caused damage even if it had fallen in another area." Pictures of the debris and crater at the crash site are consistent with the Russian Shahed-136 one-way drone when compared to other UAVs that have been shot down or crashed. We'll link to the debris pictures and their comparisons in the situation report. You can learn more in the podcast description.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Here is my Theaterwide update. Between the evening of March the 29th and the 31st, Russia launched 14 Kh-101 and 555 cruise missiles, an Iskander-M cruise missile, a Kh-59 guided air-to-surface missile, and 23 Shahed-136 one-way drones targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. 9 Kh-101 or 555 missiles, the Kh-59, the Iskander-M, and 18 Shaheds were intercepted. Ukrhydroenergo announced that the Russian missile attack on Friday targeted the Kanevska, Dnistrovska, and Kremenchutska hydroelectric power plants, damaging all three. The attacks on the dam violated Article 56 of the Geneva Conventions. Despite the International Criminal Court determining that the Russian operation to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure in the fall of 2022 constituted multiple war crimes, Russia restarted its campaign days after warrants for the arrest of 2 senior officers were issued. The chief of the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Kyrylo Budanov, said that Russia has started using the 3M-22 hypersonic Zircon anti-ship surface-to-surface cruise missile because they are harder to intercept. While the last 2 Zircons achieved sustained hypersonic flight, they must slow down to supersonic speed in their terminal approach and have a relatively small 40-kilogram warhead. Budanov also believes that the Russian Black Sea Fleet will start using Kalibr subsonic cruise missiles against Ukraine in the near future due to the growing Russian inventory. Russia is poised to complete building a new railway connection between occupied Crimea and occupied Donetsk Oblast by late 2024, streamlining logistics. We had assessed in the summer of 2023 that it was critical this project not be completed, as it would further complicate Ukraine's defense of Kherson, Zaporizhia, and southern Donetsk Oblasts. While striking the rail connection will be much easier than the Chongar and Crimean bridges, the damage is much easier to repair. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky issued the most direct warning to the US Congress to date after confirming that Washington had pressured him to suspend attacks on Russian oil refineries. The Ukrainian leader said that without additional military aid from the US, Ukraine would increase its attacks on Russian infrastructure, reminding lawmakers, quote, "We used our drones. Nobody can say to us, you can't." An analysis of Russian advances from October 1, 2023 to March 31, 2024 showed that the two-phase Russian winter offensive captured 250 square kilometers of territory, less than half of the area liberated by the Ukrainian summer offensive. Since January 1, 2023, Russia has had a net gain of less than 300 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, an area roughly the size of Tampa, Florida. The main Defense Intelligence Directorate of the UK published a sober assessment of Russia's military capabilities versus Ukraine's. Quote, Russia maintains a significant quantitative advantage in the conflict, outmatching Ukraine in munitions and equipment numbers. It is likely recruiting approximately 30,000 additional personnel a month and can highly likely continue to absorb losses and continue attacks aimed at wearing down Ukrainian force. Unquote. This aligns with our January the 18th, 2024 flash report sent to our subscribers. Quote, Moscow will continue to send tens of thousands of its citizens and foreign fighters to their deaths every month. If it comes down to just numbers and nothing more, Ukraine and then the rest of Europe will have a major issue over the next decade. Ukraine may have been killing 20,000 Russians a month at the start of 2024. The Kremlin increased replacements to 35,000. Ukraine is now killing 30 to 35,000 Russian soldiers a month. Incredibly, that isn't enough. What is more concerning is how quickly Russia's youth is embracing quasi-Stalinism and fascism. There is an entire generation being raised ready to die for the modern Tsar's ambition. Ukraine needs to achieve 4 things. Get the attritional warfare math to a minimum of 1 to 10 ratio theater-wide. This is possible, but requires long-term external support and continued adaptation. It also requires major reforms in their military training programs. Exhaust Russia's Cold War inventory advantage. This is ongoing, but will take another 18 to 24 months to achieve. Sanctions combined with Russia's self-imposed isolation will continue to bite harder. Increase its own war production capacity and continue to find ways to adapt to stay ahead of the sword and shield equation. The ability to strike Russian infrastructure within Russia at scale and repeatedly. We stand by our assessment, and if victory in war always came down to the size of the population a country can throw into a meat grinder, everyone should surrender to India now. France announced it would provide Ukraine with a new batch of Asta-30 anti-aircraft missiles for the SAMP-T air defense system. SAMP-T and Patriot are the only 2 systems capable of consistently intercepting missiles traveling at ballistic speed, including Kinzhal and Zircon. NASAMS is also capable, but with a significantly lower success rate. The German news agency Bild reported that Ukraine has started to receive more ammunition for the Gepard short-range air defense system, which is critical for intercepting Shahed 136 one-way drones and subsonic cruise missiles such as the KH-101. Estonian officials said that there is still a shortfall of funds for the Czech Republic-led ammunition initiative for Ukraine, countering a report from Czech officials that enough funds have been secured to procure 1 million shells. Estonia also believes that some ammunition won't arrive on the battlefield until the end of 2024. The Foreign Minister of Poland reported the polar opposite. Radoslav Sikorski said that transportation of ammunition was, quote, already being organized. On Friday, Czech officials said that there was enough funds to purchase 1 million shells that would arrive over the coming weeks and months. In our assessment, European leaders are engaging in an intentional disinformation campaign to mask how many shells Ukraine will receive and when they will arrive. Our analysts have decided to read the room, and we won't speculate on how many shells or when. Everyone is going to know when they show up, especially Russian troops. U.S. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said that Congress would prioritize the issue of providing additional military assistance to Ukraine when the Easter recess ends on April the 9th. Other Republican congresspeople communicated the same talking point on the Sunday morning talk show circuit. Johnson indicated that neither the already approved Senate bill nor the draft bill written by Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick will be moved forward. Johnson plans to advance a new bill that will likely provide military aid as a loan. It is unclear how soon after April the 9th the House will start debate, and a draft version of the proposed aid package has not been made public. Discharge Petition 9, which would advance the already passed Senate bill and now has bipartisan support, only needs 27 more signatures. Speaking on the Sunday morning news circuit, Congressman Mike Turner said, quote, "Simply the brutality that is happening, the murderous nature of what Russia is doing, we need to respond. We have to continue our support." We updated our table for Russian versus Ukrainian equipment losses on March the 31st. It is too long and boring to read it as part of the podcast, but you can become a patron and get access to more information about the Russia-Ukraine war we don't cover here. It's time for Russian Mobiks Mobilization and Mir update. Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin signed the spring conscription decree, ordering the draft of 150,000 men from age 18 to 30. Unlike mobilization, Russia conscripts between 240,000 to 300,000 men a year for 1 year of military service. Under Russian law, conscripts are not supposed to engage in frontline fighting. While the Ministry of Defense has tried to utilize conscripts in Ukraine, the harsh backlash from family members continues to make their wide-scale use a taboo, at least for now. The spring conscription will include men in occupied Crimea, Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, in violation of the Geneva Conventions. On March the 22nd, ISKP terrorists killed Russian GRU Colonel Timur Myasnikov during the attack on the Crocus City Hall Theater and Mall. Shot 3 times, Colonel Myasnikov was on leave from fighting in Ukraine. Yes, Moscow officially blamed Ukraine for the attack, and I've already spent more time defending the truth on the podcast. Ukraine was not behind, ordered, or in any way provided material support for the March the 22nd attack. There were a number of reports in Russian state media of Central Asian immigrants who appear to be of the Muslim faith being attacked, beaten, their businesses vandalized, and evictions from their homes without due process. The Russian National Guard conducted a massive sweep of the Wildberries distribution center in Elektrostal, east of Moscow. All foreign workers were screened for their immigration status and to verify that those required to register with the Commissariat for Military Service had. At least 21 people were arrested. The Federal Security Service of Russia, FSB, conducted an anti-terror sweep in the Republic of Dagestan cities of Makhachkala and Kaspiysk. At least 3 people were arrested and accused of plotting a terror attack. After the operation in Makhachkala, Russian security forces arrested all of the Tajik garbage truck operators who worked for the Makhachkala 1 municipal unitary enterprise. No reason was given, but Makhachkala officials warned that trash pickup could be delayed for an extended period. The head of affairs of the Moscow Patriarchate, Metropolitan Grigory of the Resurrection, ordered all Russian Orthodox priests to pray daily for victory over Ukraine. Priests who don't comply with the order to ask for divine intervention to kill their fellow man will be, quote, deprived of their dignity. I'm not sure how a priest praying every day for success in killing their fellow man hasn't already lost their dignity. But this is the land of Mobiks, Mobilization and Mir. I'm not going to ask. Russia, you're clearly not okay. It looks like things are about to get very spicy in geopolitics. The lead investigative journalist for The Insider, Hristo Groziev, wrote on Twitter, also known as X, that the next 2 weeks will bring quite a few interesting investigations. The first wave has already started. Polish security services raided a Russian spy network in cooperation with Czech intelligence. The raid was linked to charges filed against a Polish citizen who is accused of spying for Russia, with sweeps conducted in Warsaw and Tychy. The spy network was working to, quote, implement the Kremlin's foreign policy objectives, including weakening Poland's position on the world stage, discrediting Ukraine as well as the image of EU organs. The arrests came the day after the Czech Security and Information Service exposed a Russian-backed bribery ring that ensnared politicians, including representatives of the EU Parliament, from 6 countries: Germany, France, Poland, Belgium, the Netherlands and Hungary. Hundreds of thousands of euros in bribes were allegedly channeled through the Voice of Europe, backed by Ukrainian traitor Viktor Medvedchuk and Artem Marchevsky, the ex-producer of the pro-Kremlin TV channel 112 Ukraine. The Czech Republic shut down the Voice of Europe on Wednesday, with only its Telegram channel still operating. The names of the politicians involved have not been named, but reportedly include members of far-right and far-left parties. Latvia declared a Russian diplomat persona non grata for carrying out, quote, provocative public communications. The name of the diplomat was not made public, and they have until April the 10th to leave the country. Serbian President Aleksandar Vucic's major announcement turned out to be a nothing burger with a side of room-temperature water. During a speech on Friday, Vucic said that Kosovo would be accepted into the Council of Europe by the end of May and promised a strong response. When pressed on what that would look like, he declined to say what steps could be taken, adding that the door for negotiations was still open. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.